Welcome. My name is Yemi Adefarasin of Kingdom Lifeline Apostolic Ministries.
And I am Obii Pax-Harry of Nehemiah Apostolic Resource Center, Abuja.
I'm Ernest Centerport Apostolic Center, Abuja.
Oh, well, guys, good to see you.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, and finally, we get to have our conversation.
Yes.
Isn't it wonderful?
Very wonderful.
It's taken a while, but now at least we're sitting, and I'm sure we're going to have fun, talking about issues. It's something that's really on my heart, and it's basically, I'm looking at it like faith in times of crisis and conflicts. I mean, the world, the way it's advancing, there's just so much happening everywhere, from nation to nation. It just feels like there's no nation without, conflicts and crisis, and in colloquial street language, we say drama. And we really want to be able to, really have a conversation about it. I believe that nation to nation, every nation is due conversations. Christians, we don't often do that. And I think that that's what the Father will have us do, that we just come down to the, to the levels of just, Joe Blogs, ordinary people, that we can help them to understand, how to be light in the darkness. There seems to be so much darkness, so much happening, and so much confusion, to the degree where people can't even tell, when God's speaking and when man's speaking. There's just too much going on in society. And I know we've often talked about having this conversation, and I think it's a good time, even if you're thinking in context of Nigeria, the elections, and all that's happening. There really is a lot. People have a lot of questions, and they're looking for answers, and there are also so many things that are being put out there as answers. I know you don't have it all the answers, and we don't know it all, but I thought it would be good for us as great friends, and whose hearts, are, beating the same way, and we have, shared vision. We've talked about this, and I think it's a good time to just really have a conversation about faith in times of crisis. I don't know what you think. How do people manage these times where there's so much out there, so much being said, so much, misunderstanding of what's being said,
I think first and foremost that as we progress in times, conflicts, crisis is inevitable, but crisis is the catalyst for change.
Yes.
And we need to be able to look at the kind of change that we want, and be able to start seeding into that change and have conversation. So I think it's very good that we're all here, because we're all standing around Mount Zion. Ezekiel was standing from one perspective, he saw God as an ox, from another perspective as a man, one perspective a lion, from another perspective an eagle. So depending on where life has positioned you and your circumstances, your ability to comprehend God is affected. But the important thing is that we all have facets of Mount Zion that we need to piece together so that we can have a composite view or a bigger picture of what God is doing. So I think us sitting around the table and having this conversation, is overdue.
What do you think, Ernest?
No, I was just thinking of something. What Stephen Covey has said, that change is inevitable and change is part of life, and crisis generates change. But what makes it possible for us to go through change is that there must be something inside of us that is like a changeless core. There's something inside of us that does not wash away with change. For example, in crisis situation, we look for something to grab, onto, to hold onto. If we don't find that thing, then it becomes challenging, to deal with crisis. For me, for example, sometimes when I look at the condition of things and I think that everything seems hopeless, I turn to the last page in the Bible, and then I just look how it all ended, because the book of Revelation is a book of finishing. I see that in the end, there was no more pain, no more sorrows, no more tears. Antichrist is gone, Satan is gone, all the difficulty is gone. Then I'm comforted. Then I know that there must be a way of relating with this crisis that must resolve in this perfect finish where God is in charge and all these bad things are gone.
well, you guys are, tough guys. You're apostles. You know how to get to revelation. Well, I'm an unrepentant, optimist. I just like to wake up and it's all gone. I look strong, but I'm not. But yeah, you guys are, you're mature. You're apostles of repute. I mean, the Job logs on the street, the guy, the woman who's totally, confused. They've heard so many, voices, so many, prescriptions of how to manage, they don't even know it's crisis or conflict. We're trying to define stuff through this conversation, but people are in situations and climates, and it's not just peculiar to this nation called Nigeria, even other nations. And I mean, there are people, there are countries where people are saying, well, the church has told us that president is a president we should have, but, their actions doesn't quite match. And, so people are just really, finding it difficult, to follow through, some of our teachings and some of our explanations and some of the things that we're saying, which is necessitating conversations, from leaders that help people. Even I like what you said, the way the book of Revelation ends, and I like what Apostle says, conflicts is a catalyst for change. But there's some people who'll be like, I don't want to go through this, in such a rough way. I'd much rather know how do I apply my faith in a time where everything is going topsy-turvy. I really need someone to tell me what's going on, to give me a cue, through the darkness. So faith in times of conflict and crisis, how do people, apply their faith? How do people demonstrate faith? How do, people even recognize that, by going to the last page of the book of Revelation, there's truth, to help you, through times of confusion, that if the confusion, the darkness, the air of confusion is not spoken into, it could really lead to major despondency. You know what I mean? Especially in cultures cultures where people just don't speak. I don't know, when there's an issue, people are not expected to speak. I don't really know. I'm just thinking, what do you think?
And in the last couple of weeks, it's like despondency has just settled on Nigeria.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really amazing. And I think we need to let people know that, for instance, with Ezekiel, after he prophesied to the dry bones, there was a huge noise. There's a rattling, there was a shaking. So people need to understand that things always get worse circumstantially before they get better. And that everything we go through is a process where it's a going through. And at the end of the day, like Ernest said, the outcome will always favor, in this case, God, the cause of his kingdom and his redemptive purpose for Nigeria. Many years ago, I was going through a situation whereby there was an important decision, a marriage decision I had to take as to the date I was going to get married, blah, 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 blah. And all hell broke loose. A month from the intended wedding and everything else, I had a bad car accident that the person I hit almost died. He was a drunkard that was crossing the street. Yeah. And there was no doubt that this was just a satanic orchestration. Every day I would go out, something bad would happen. And my Christian community was interpreting it as, what you're about to do is not of God, so don't do it. And I was in the greatest confusion I have ever had in my life. But out of that moment, I lay in my bedroom at home in Lagos, and I said, God, speak to me. And he gave me a word out of Isaiah 7:9. In the NIV version of the Bible says, if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. The Message version says, if you fall to pieces in a time of crisis, how small is your strength? So I learned that no matter what crisis we are going through, no matter how bad things are, we need to stand, like you said, in our convictions and stand the storms. And when God sees that we're still holding on to what we believe, we're holding on to our convictions, we're holding on to what we believe our God has said, and what the divine outcome of all this is, that as long as we give him that seed of faith and belief and constancy and endurance and perseverance and endurance, that things may look bad now, but if we hold the course, and he sees us holding the course, then it will trigger a divine outcome.
So what you're basically saying is, when you were going through what you were going through, people were misinterpreting the process.
Of course.
So if, in a situation like that, you don't have a word from the Lord, you can be completely misaligned.
Yes.
Because people have actually misinterpreted and misunderstood, your process, and they're trying to superimpose something out of a culture onto what you're going through.
Exactly.
So that's really brilliant. That should encourage anyone, listening, that, there is a process, even in a time of crisis or seemingly conflict, that it can be misinterpreted if you are not, in that place of, intimacy with the Lord, being confident in your relationship with him, that, he can speak to you and give you a word to take you through. So this can be applied on a national level. It can be applied to nations, isn't it?
Yes,
continents. That just what you went through described in your personal life. So it's a transition, but it's a transition that came with quite a lot of crisis. But you had a word which gave you light.
Yes.
So we can if we can put that in a context of a nation also going through birth pangs. To be born, isn't it?
Yes.
For a new thing to come, for change to come.
Not difficult. Are difficult. It's painful. But the moment the thing is born, the mother forgets all the pain she has been through for the joy of what is ahead. And Nigerians need to hold our course. But we also need to come into collective conversation to. This is what we all agree God is saying. This is the direction we all need to move, and we just need to hold the helm, hold our course, and become strategic. How do we birth this thing?
I'm going to come back to that, what Nigerians need to do, because you've taken us to another level. Let me just, another level. But I don't know, they just, what you described about that experience that I think, is so important. And also important that, we, in our conversation, we let people understand that personal experience can be a nation's experience.
Exactly.
Really.
And that's probably what we're going through now.
Exactly.
Yes.
And which means it's very important to get a word of the Lord, and also for people to understand that, that word becomes what you hold on to, in the time of crisis. And that's what helps you to demonstrate faith. Because I think people want to resolve without a fight. And, I don't get it.
Not gonna happen.
Exactly. You want to change. Oh, my God. You want a new nation without a birth pangs.
The greater the battles, the greater the victories.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think that story he just told now is very instructive. I like what you said about the word of the Lord. The value of the word of the Lord is that it gives us divine perspective, because things are not always what they look like. Yes. Sometimes God would allow in his wisdom what he could easily avert with his power. He let it, and when he does that, is because he's working at something much bigger. For example, here's Jesus Christ. Permit me to use this phrase. I'll talk like a writer. The boy is only 33 years. He's not built a house. He's not yet married. He's not settled in his mother. He's at the prime of his years. They falsely accuse him, strap him naked on a tree, and kill him. Now, anybody looking in the natural would think, "Oh, what a loser!"
It's
Oh,
just
what
bad
you know?
news.
Yes, it was bad news. It was bad. Somebody even looked at him and wept for his mother. That kind of situation. But in God's perspective, it was totally different. If you look in the backstage, all that happened in Adam was being reversed in that instance when that limp body was hanging on the cross. The law was being taken away. The sin of man was being eroded. The future was being brought in. God was being connected to man. The universe was being re-engineered. All of those wonderful things, all of heaven and earth were focused on that one spot. The most massive things that happened, time was being defined as AC and BC. All those wonderful things happened when a naked body was hanging. In the natural, it looks like he's defeated.
Everything,
But
yeah.
on the inside, in the spirit, something massive is taking place. Like now, I'm taking this knowledge and then juxtaposing it on what's happening in our country right now. People will look and think that we're almost finished or we're almost done. But perhaps we need a divine perspective. We need to look at it, from God's angle. I'm sure we would see something different. We would see that there's something else at work, that is bigger than what it appears to be like. And I'm persuaded we have prayed, we have fasted. Senator Jacob said we should raise praise all over the country. We did. All the prophets of repute I know of in America and the country have prophesied. We've engaged. God is not Baal that you call upon from sunrise to sunset and he won't answer. I believe he has answered us and he has heard us.
Exactly.
Although many times when God answers, we don't even know that he has answered because we're expecting the answer in a certain way. Like when Lazarus, was...
even Elijah in the cave.
Okay, yeah. Like Lazarus was ill and the sister said, "Come and heal him." That was the expectation. And Jesus allowed him to die. Was Jesus wicked? No. He had something bigger in view. He said he wanted resurrection. He wanted greater testimony. He wanted the glory of God. So sometimes when we want God to move in a certain way, like in this podcast situation, just shift things like this, bring this person in, and then God acts differently. Sometimes we lose faith when we don't understand he is working at something bigger. I believe that's what is happening in our country right now. God is at work. He has answered us. He has heard us, and he's going for something bigger.
So what I'm hearing from you guys is, in a time of seemingly crisis, conflicts, we have to be intentional about staying Christian, hearing God, understanding process, hearing the word of the Lord, and knowing that God doesn't work the way that we work and how we want him to work. But being ready all the time to receive his perspective, which we don't even get in a day. You know what I mean? So it seems to me like there is a maturing, of the church that is going on, really. And people have to understand. People talk a lot about process, but when they actually, in the process of process, they're like, "Get me out of here. Get me out of here." They're not waiting for the fourth man anymore. They're like, "Get me out of the fire. It's too hot."
You see, it's a capacity building process. God is building capacity. In the early church, the persecution they faced brought them together for a commonality of purpose. That with everybody's dropped their personal agendas. We in the church in Nigeria, we need to drop all our personal agendas and begin to have a collective, inclusive conversation. And just submit to one another, recognizing our graces and then becoming strategic. Because in the crisis, God is saying, "I want you to align. Understand what I'm doing." And there has to be an interpretative aspect. This is what I'm doing. This is the direction God is taking us. What are the strategies to get there? You can't take Jericho without a strategy.
Absolutely.
And Jericho is the gateway of the promised land. We're going to have to lie still. The strategic thinkers need to come. We can't spiritualize everything.
Oh, come on, you're speaking my language now.
We have to have thinkers. Okay, this is what we believe God is doing. We've downloaded it from the Spirit. You, the thinkers, think, how do we flesh this out? How do we become strategic in it? Then number 3, how do we all take responsibility for it? Because we can't just abdicate, hey, all right, elections have come and gone.
God's going to do it.
God's going to do it. God's not going to do it. He works with us. So what are we going to do? Nigerians should not be apathetic because we've had the first round. You're not going to go and vote tomorrow. then you're
Because
abdicating
it
your
didn't go your way.
responsibility.
Because
The
it didn't go
kingdom
your
of
way.
God is about responsibility.
Yes.
The government shall rest upon his shoulders. He's not talking about Jesus' shoulders, he's talking about our shoulders. So we need to take responsibility. And we've got to say, we're going to do our own part. When we've done our own part, even if it goes in the wrong direction that we think, because we have given God the seed to work with, God can intervene when he's ready to intervene.
And like that also highlights what you were saying, Ernest, that having done all, that what we think is an outcome may not even be what God thinks, but that we have to learn to, like they say, flow with God. We have to learn to work with God, no matter how long it takes, but to get his perspective, because it's always redemptive. It's always going to work out good. It's always going to be something that, is going to it's not going to bring hopelessness. It's going to bring people actually out of hopelessness. It's really great what you guys are saying. My burden, like I said, it's really for the Joe Blogs, the ordinary person, the young man or the young lady on social media, the people who are not really mature enough to know how to work with the voice of God, and suddenly maybe they've been in this prayer thing, and everyone's praying, and perhaps in the prayer they had an agenda in their heart. They had an outcome that they wanted. They had something that they desired, and it didn't come, and suddenly there is a hopelessness that is wanting to descend on the nation, on people. So hearing what you're saying in this conversation, I want to just again, make sure that, the person out there who's listening can get some cues, some direction, and some, hope from what our conversation, that, in a time of crisis, in a time of conflict, obviously, if things are the way they are, they become a conflict, that, they have to hold on to, God. You have to have that, they have to know that when it's looking like there is so much that is not working, it doesn't mean that God is not in it. You must not interpret it from your cultural perspective. Your worldview should not even come into it. You need to get a word from the Lord, like what you described in the time that you were making a critical decision. Because, seasons of intersection, spiritual intersection, there's seasons that force us to make decisions and choices. And that's responsibility bearing. And that's the kingdom of God. So what you're saying is that something is being produced that is put us on a timeline, on a threshold of time, a crossover time that you just can't glide over. You have to be responsible enough to make decisions. That's what I get from your amazing story of that experience.
We need to stay the course, and then each of us take responsibility. What part do I contribute to this whole thing, and by taking responsibility?
Okay, let me take you back again, because like I said, my burden and concern is for like kind of the less mature. I mean, you're great men of God, you're great apostles, and you're teachers, and you teach people to survive in rough terrains. But the one that you're teaching to swim, listening to you now, I want to be sure that at the end of our conversation, they feel empowered, to do what they've got to do, exercise civic responsibility of voting, even have conversations about your nation, offer yourself to be, an agent of change wherever you are, that God can use you, and know that no matter how difficult things are, and no matter how much conflict there is out there, no matter how crisis, how dark it looks in society right now, Nigerian society, so much going on, so much, that you can be that person that exercises God perspective, because you got it. You have, you have been infused with heaven's perspective of things, so you can now partner with God. So your story is remarkable in that, you were going through this. It looked like you were swimming in the opposite, direction of the current, and people were misinterpreting. People were interpreting cultural filters, but once you had the word of God, and a word from God, you held on to it, you came through. So we're also in transition, and what you said, I just love that story of how, because the Revelation, the last chapter, last page is how it all ends.
Yes.
So go to the end of the story.
Yes.
The beginning was good because God had a redemptive plan. The end is good as well. So at the end of the day, it's going to be good. There's another concern I have, dear apostles. I think that, part of the major confusion people are having right now is that there is a big, misunderstanding between conviction and prophecy. I don't know what you think. That I'm reading and hearing a lot of people, alleging that some pastors were, false prophets, or some prophets were real or whatever. There's a lot of, conversation going on about, what God said and whether He said or did He not say or did it. I mean, like we all know, we're new creation, and every born again, spirit-filled Christian can hear the voice of God. But I do believe that, where Nigeria is at now in the current, state of the nation and affairs, things happening, I think a lot of people, are mistaken. That's my personal opinion, and I just really would like to know what you think, that people are confusing conviction, for prophecy, and it's perhaps your view of this could help someone out there, to know how to, because if you don't know the difference and you're not being instructed, by that voice of God, you've not sorted you're now in confusion because you have not quite understood where a man is coming from, and to know that you too can come from that, same, viewpoint of that person, then you're just going to fall apart. And that's what you're saying, that your faith cannot, be small in a day of adversity. So I don't know what you think about this, maybe Ernest, maybe you can.
I think that whenever we don't have a specific thus says Lord on a particular issue, yes, for ourselves or for a particular issue, then the responsibility is upon us to use the wisdom of God that God has given to us. I know people who would not do anything until they hear a so-called prophetic word, and such people tend to be spooky, or they run a risk of going off the deep end, because God gave us something in between our ears called our brain and our mind, our intellect, and sometimes we can process things. So when we don't have God has not specifically spoken, because even in the Bible, He didn't speak all the time to all the prophets. He didn't speak every single day to Daniel, or every single day to Isaiah or somebody. Yeah. So whenever He's not speaking, He's silent on an issue, and we need to make decisions, then we can use the wisdom of God, that we have. So I think that people, like individuals, have the right, to own their own convictions, to look at things, analyze it with the wisdom that they have, and say, in the present situation, I think it is wise to do this, or it is wise to do that. But like you said, Apostle, when a man of God says that, maybe in church, declares his conviction, people think because he's a man of God, he is always speaking as God's spokesman, whether he's on pulpit or he's out of the pulpit. But no, it's not always like that. Sometimes just the man of God in church is also a citizen in a country, and then he has a right as a citizen, to certain things. I put up a post recently on Facebook, and then somebody said to me, man of God, you're supposed to be neutral, don't say this kind of thing. And I didn't respond, but I was thinking, this kind of thinking needs to be corrected. Neutral, why should I be neutral? I should have a conviction. Yes, I should look at the political situation, for example, and think that I prefer this candidate because based on this and this and this information that I know, he's the right person. But people think, except you're speaking for God, don't speak at all. But that's not accurate.
So I think we need to, conviction is born out of inner witness, not allowing the prophets and so-called prophecy to lead us. When prophecy starts leading you, then that becomes manipulation, which borders into witchcraft. The prophecy is supposed to confirm what we already witness in our hearts. So we're convicted in our conscience by the sum total of knowledge we have and the conviction that this is what God is saying, because I received it. Remember, you posted something a few days ago about the horse and the rider,
Yes.
and about the song. Yes, and that was a couple of us picked it up at the same time. So for you to put it out there, I was convicted that what I heard from God was correct, because my spirit was bearing witness.
Yes.
Where we are in Nigeria today, we need to use. God gave us common sense to use. All He is doing is just anointing our common sense. He didn't say we should drop our common sense. What kind of Nigeria do we desire to have? What do we want to see in Nigeria? Justice, righteousness, a judicial system that brings equity to all, a legislative system that is devoid of all the shenanigans that we're up to and all the illegitimacy of trying to get power through the wrong ways and everything. What kind of Nigeria do we see? In these elections, what outcome do we want? Who do we want to lead us? People that we can repose in, that have integrity, that have a heart for the development of Nigeria holistically, and not just a section of people.
Yes.
Yeah, these are the things that we need to look at. Indeed. What are the character? What is the character of all the people that want to come into a place of leadership? What character do they have? The character of Christ. What do they have? These are common sense issues.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
we really need to look at and stop being partisan. And the worst thing that we can do is let anybody buy our vote because we want something to eat. That's what Esau did, and he lost the birthright. We should not sell our birthright for what? A morsel of food, and we eat that food. We're going to be hungry tomorrow. And are those same people going to bring us more money? They're not, because they've already used you to achieve their own selfish end and objective.
So I'm hearing that you're even speaking from a place of conviction.
Of course.
Because I began to look at this thing objectively, that a lot of people that are feeling a sense of despondency and lethargy and apathy even to continue to exercise their civic right. There are a lot of people who are like, I don't even want to pray, or God's let us down. And you already addressed that the way God God's perspective is not usually ours, and the way that God moves his dealings sometimes it's not the way we see it. So I've been very, very concerned that and I've looked like cross spectrum. And the sort of the words that I heard, some of the ministers that I heard speak into the elections, I felt were speaking out of personal conviction, and that they did not speak a thus says the Lord's word. And I think it is very important. I believe that as a nation that this is something we need to examine, that we need to have a lot more people. And like you said, God actually gave us intellect, and it concerns me that a lot of people in our cultural context are waiting for God to come and do everything for them. God will do it, not my portion, and all these different things. And that borders on what you said, that we're supposed to be a responsibility-bearing people. That's part of our... if you look at Genesis chapter 1, our stewardship responsibility to the earth, to nations. I think the Christian story is one of the most exciting, very plain, very, direct, very instructional. If people really bother to look at it, it's not really complex. The man that God created, mankind even, anyone, mankind he created, Adam, he gave responsibility over. And now, coming through Christ, the Christians now have even a greater, responsibility to the earth than, fallen man. So I've been very concerned that, people are seeming not to understand what prophecy is, that supernatural ability to perceive the mind of God, to download it and to transmit it, as the voice of God. Totally different from a person speaking from a conviction, which is really what faith is. Faith, being a conviction born out of a firm persuasion. So could it be that we are a nation that has not been teaching responsibility bearing, convictions? Because the founding fathers, we say the labors of our fathers will not, our heroes will not be in vain. The founding fathers, people who fought for independence could not have done that, except, out of conviction. You cannot change anything. You can't be a reformer. You can't be a change agent. You can't be a catalyst, without being a reformer, without being the person of conviction. It is that conviction that drives you to do the extraordinary. So I've been very concerned, apostles. Maybe we can just also keep, talking about this, so that those who listen, we could probably, if I can help someone understand this. And the picture I really got in my time of thinking this through, is, Elijah, who got really quite fed up with the state of affairs, in his nation, So he must have been someone who really had that love for Yahweh, who, had that relationship, that he thought, well, no, I'm not going to just maintain status quo. I'm not going to be like everybody else and have this major diversion of faith and act like Baal is God and allow Ahab and Jezebel change my narrative, my experience, my relationship with God. So I'm going to have to take a risk and do something about this. So I believe Elijah moved towards, I would say, government house. He moved towards the king's palace out of conviction, because it doesn't make natural sense otherwise. And because he did, then heaven assisted him. Because again, if we look at it, how did he go past, all of that to just be in the king's court and begins to challenge the core, of the national problem? So I do believe, like, you said, Ernest, that, God's given us intellect, and we're also citizens, even as, leaders of churches, of ministries, God's servants. We're leaders. So, you're in a nation. You're being, you're living under a government. If things are not working, or if things that have been said, have not been fulfilled, or, we should really, I think that's the major responsibility of the church or any Christian. So I believe that a lot of people spoke out of their conviction, but because a lot of people have not been trained to understand the voice of God, to manage it, to administrate it, they took it as a thus says, because also we have a lot of idolatry in our culture. You believe that the man of God is God, so you haven't even bothered to check with God, to know whether he spoke out of conviction or not. I believe conviction and prophecy, and I look at Elijah, Ezekiel that you spoke about, and the value of dry bones. Ezekiel was really pretty much, where a lot of people are now. He wasn't managing the crisis very well. He wasn't managing the conflict. The climate had, affected him. And God had to resuscitate him literally. God had to, work on his perspective. So that's so different now. That's the prophecy realm. Elijah, the conviction realm. That God had to ask him, can these bones live? Because the guy had, the guy had become affected by what was happening.
The situation was so bad that he didn't think that anything could come out of it. All these scattered bones, the whole house of Israel, discombobulated, dysfunctional.
And his humanity as well. His humanity also showed in that. So I love that, because that's God, the spirit of prophecy. That's God working with this man.
That's right.
So it shows that we're human. You know what I'm saying? We're human. The greatest prophet, natural in the natural realm, is human. He's operating in the gift of prophecy that is in every other believer. So God asked him, can these bones live? He's only because he's in that state like everybody else. He's trying to work his faith. We just use that word loosely. He's trying to work his belief system, to come up to God's perspective. He's like, right now, I'm not even in a position to answer this question, Yahweh. You know what's going on. Right now, I don't know. You see how God worked with him, and then God could use him as a prophet.
You made an important point, and I think everybody needs to understand that God doesn't work for us, just work for us. He works with us.
Yes.
And as long as we are ready to play our part, God will work with us and do the rest. When Ezekiel decided to follow God's plan, it was in 1967 or 1948 that Israel became a nation.
Yes.
This prophecy that Ezekiel prophesied all those 1,500 years before became a reality in 1948.
For natural Israel.
For natural Israel. So we need to take heart that whatever God has said, down the line, like you said, it's going to end up God's way.
But we need to know, differentiate where he's speaking through a man, a woman, or when the man or the woman has been a citizen, like you said. I really like that.
Standing for conviction.
I really like that, because it's important that we differentiate between God and man. Because a lot of people have not come into the God realm.
Yes.
The God they see is just the man realm. You know, my pastor said, so it's going to be, you know, that thus says the Lord. I have had a burden that, you know, if people knew the difference between speaking from conviction and prophecy, then we're going to arise, shine, for your light has come, the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. I think Nigeria is in such a great place right now, and that the death pang is to, you know, for sons to rise who say, give me Nigeria for my inheritance, people who can run and manage nations. That's what you
that's what we're saying, and
that's really good.
I think responsibility of the church now is to teach the difference between the prophecy, how to judge prophecy,
well, we've
and
got
differentiate it from conviction.
And we've got
Number two, but again, look at Nigeria. There's no country in this earth where you will not find a Nigerian doing church or doing something. If you go to Greenland or Iceland, you probably find a Nigerian doing Igloo Ministries International Incorporated. That's how powerful we are.
And doing it well.
Look at the resources that God has blessed Nigeria with. We can feed the whole of Africa.
Yes.
The challenges we have been through are building so much capacity for us to become leaders in the whole world. So the future of Nigeria is so bright. If everybody will just take hope, stand for their convictions, be a voice,
for their convictions,
not keep on compromising, because what we compromise to get, we'll have to compromise to keep. And you cannot be a change agent if you're going to conform to the status quo.
Okay, so I think we're going to carry on this conversation because we're going somewhere now, because we're saying we're going to need transformational leaders. And then we're going to figure out, you know, who they are, you know, and help also define. But right now, I think we've covered some really brilliant, you know, topical issues, and we hope that anyone hearing, you know, this conversation, that they will be part of this conversation and understand that, you know, something is going on that is bigger, you know, than us, man, and that is, you know, greater than what we think, and we can't understand it with our own worldview, isn't it? We can't. It's not even. It's greater than our worldview. We just have to relax in God, and like in that situation, knowing that in transitions, you need a word to help you, and you have to hold on to that word. And our prayer is that we can hear God corporately, you know, and don't substitute God's voice for what, you know, a man of God who has every right as a citizen to be displeased or pleased with the system and should not be judged for having a conviction, should actually be celebrated, in my opinion, because I feel that everybody should have something that they believe in enough that they can die for. I think that it's very important. You know, change can't come unless we have people like that. So thank you so very much, apostles. I have also always had this, you know, belief that, you know, apostles are those that help define, you know, and to define anything is to name it, so that people that have understanding. So I really thank you so very much. We've been talking about this conversation. Finally, we've had it. So it's
we've begun it.
Yes, it's it will lead to others. We're going to come and ask. If anybody asks any questions about this, you're going to come back and answer those questions. So I would say that it's a new day. So thank you very, very much, you know, for we taking that risk. So we're just going to have to stay with it.
You're welcome.
So do you have a word for everybody for tomorrow? Is it
Do I have a
everybody
word?
go out and exercise your civic responsibility and be convicted about what you do?
I guess that's the word.
Yeah. Everybody needs to go out
Yes.
and
Very
stand with
important.
their convictions,
Very
make common
important.
sense decisions,
Very
Yes.
and
important.
exercise their civic responsibility.
Yes.
So you're giving God a seed
Yes.
to work with.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether things may not go the way you want.
Yeah.
As the heavens are higher than the earth,
Yeah.
so are God's ways than our ways.
That's
And don't
right.
use your emotion at all. You know, what kind of
Yes.
country do you want? What kind of leader do you want? You know, you go out there, whoever is out, there to be voted for, make sure it is someone that, can deliver on what you want, because God's already planted what he wants in your heart. Ecclesiastes tells us
Amen.
that.
Yes, I believe so.
So